We're going to go over the 4 basic reasons why you have bubbles in your pump, or it's taken twice as long for you to prime your pump up. So the first reason why you might be getting those air bubbles in your pump, or it's taken twice as long for your pump to prime up, is underneath your pump lid on your hair basket, you have a gasket for your gasket cover. Definitely check this gasket cover out. Make sure there's nothing obstructing it. If there's any flat spots on it, it's time for a new one. These are known causes for air leaks. Basically, this is a Hayward Super Pump with this cover gasket, part number SPX 1600S. You can go and Google online. Basically, your pump's going to have a little label right here, and basically it's going to have your pump model. This one's an SP2605X7. You can run that in, basically do cover gasket, and it should pop up your pump styles gasket. If that's replaced and you still have your air leak, then we're going to move on to the front side of your pump. Going into the front of your pump on your suction side, there's going to be a male threaded end that goes in there. So basically what we're going to do is you'll also either have a union on the front with a 3-way valve in front of it, or basically it's just going to be hard lined in here. So the only way to get that out if it's hard lined in here is basically you're going to have to cut this PVC part of the pipe. If you do have to cut this part of the PVC pipe, I highly recommend cutting out at about a ½ an inch and putting in a $10 union. So at your local hardware store, you can find these. This is an 1.5 inch union. Like I said, if you don't have one on the front of this, the only way to get this unthreaded and to be able to get some Teflon and some pipe dope on here to seal this front end is basically cut it off. I recommend putting in the union. So we would cut out a ½ inch out of the pipe, and basically then you can take your pump out anytime you want just by unthreading this union. Basically all you're going to do is primer, glue this on this end, this union on this end, and basically have full access. But we have a union on this one, so we'll unthread that. And I always like to pull out the big dogs to take care of these small projects. So here we've got some super channel locks. And what we'll do is basically counterclockwise, you'll unthread this. Once we get this unthreaded, you'll see that it's kind of a mess. So we're going to want to clean this all up. Wire brush, or just take some time and undress all this nasty stuff. So there'll usually be pipe dope in the end of these. As you can see, I highly recommend wire brush. We want to get all that stuff out of there. So once we got all this cleaned up, we got our male end that threads into the pump. So basically we're going to use Teflon tape, and you always want to do Teflon clockwise when the threads are facing you. We'll do about 3 to 5 wraps on this. And the reason being is when you go to face it away from you and you twist it into your pump, you want the end of that Teflon dragging, so that way it's not bunching up and coming off of the threads. So with our threads facing us, we're going to run this Teflon tape clockwise, 3 to 5 wraps, like so. Then you can use any type of PVC pipe dope. I recommend Blue Monster. It's my favorite brand. Works great. And what you're going to do, take some of this pipe dope, and you're just going to run it around the threads nice and evenly, like so. And now we're going to thread that bad boy back in. And now we've already gone over 2 of the reasons of the 4 that this pump could be sucking air in the front end. So we'll bust out our big boys again, and we'll get this guy cranked down in there. If you did have a union on the front of this and you didn't have to cut it, I definitely highly recommend measuring the distance between the front end of this to the pump because if you had some threads showing, you're going to want those threads showing, so this way this union lines up square with how it used to be. Unless your pump's got some move to it, you want this to be exactly threaded the same amount into the pump as it was. So now we got this threaded in nice and tight. We've eliminated 2 reasons why this thing could be sucking air into the pump. We've replaced this gasket or made sure there was no impressions on it, lubed it up, and now we've Teflon and piped up this front male piece that goes into the pump. So those 2 are eliminated. Next, we come to your pump's either going to have a union right here or it's not. If it does have this union, sometimes these unions right here will suck air in through here, and the reason being is there's an O-ring inside here. Sometimes this O-ring gets dried out, so I highly recommend putting some lubrication on this and making sure it's lined up and that this lock ring is tight. I'm back, got my lube. So basically I just use a Pentair product. It's an O-ring lube, and we're going to spread some of that around this O-ring here, and basically that's going to seat up into this front of the pump here, line up nice, and we'll be able to get this lock collar on nice and hand tight. So off the front of the pump, going to the floor of the pump room and back to the skimmer or the drain, you're going to have a pipe coming up, and if you have one of these access points, it's going to come up to the suction line, and basically it's going to have one of these type of plugs in it, either like a 1022 with an O-ring, or it's basically just going to have your nut drive plug that screws into the top. So a lot of times with these ones with the O-rings dry out, they crack, so basically the pump's pulling this way and it's going to start sucking air through these. So we always want to check these O-rings. If the O-ring's shot, no big deal if you don't have one. We're basically just going to Teflon those up. So just like the front of this, basically you're going to do 3 to 5 wraps around this clockwise when the threads are facing us, and same with this. Basically we'll thread this back in with that Teflon on there. Definitely going to eliminate any chance of air sucking on that. So we'll tighten those down with a small pair of channel locks, like so. Give it a nice tighten down. Same with these type of plugs. 3 to 5 wraps with Teflon. Put them back into the winterizing access point. Shouldn't have any air leaks. So those are the 4 biggies. Cover gasket, male adapter piece that goes into your pump, the union that usually comes off the front of your pump, or if you have winter access points for your pool pro or yourself to winterize your pool, basically you'll have a plug like this or a plug like this that could be leaking air right there. So 3 to 5 wraps of Teflon on each one and put them back in. Should eliminate the problem. Now if you find yourself still getting air after all that, it could be leaking from like a 3-way valve on the front of the pump, which basically shuts your skimmer off to the drain. Or if that's not the case, then you could have something seriously leaking, maybe a line broke or a broken pipe somewhere. Definitely always check to make sure your pool water level's high enough up on the skimmer, so that's not sucking air either. But this should take care of your problem, and thanks for joining us. And as always, subscribe, like, and help out Pool Elementary.